So what was going on? After World War II, Germany was split into 4 different sections, one for the United States, Great Britain, France, and the USSR. Berlin was split in half, and when Germans tried escaping from one side to get to another, the Berlin Wall was built to prevent that. One side was for the United States, which was in the west, and its allies, while the other was for the USSR in the east. The Berlin Wall itself was made to keep people from moving from east to west Berlin or vice versa, because when this wall was built, families were separated and people couldn't communicate with one another or anything. They just lived in entirely 2 different worlds with this one wall, and it was a powerful symbol during the Cold War because it basically symbolized how 2 sides weren't going to physically fight, but there was a fight going on. There were many differences between East and West. So, for example, on the East side, it was made up of communists and socialists. New structures were in poor condition, remaining damaged from bombing, it was not completed, and vehicles were not as new or good quality. Meanwhile, in the West, it was made up of democratic and capitalists. New structures were in good condition, rebuilding from bombing was completed. Cars were owned by workers, and streets were filled with other methods of transportation. In other words, West Germany, speaking because of the conditions they were in, was the better side to be on, and people in East knew that, so they would try to go over to the West, but because of the wall, they were unable to. I will now play a portion from the Tear Down This Wall speech.
There is one sign the Soviets can make that would be unmistakable, that would advance dramatically the cause of freedom and peace. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
This speech was delivered on June 12th, 1987 at the Brandenburg Gate. The speech was delivered by the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, who challenged Gorbachev to tear down the wall. Its purpose was to persuade the Russian government to take down the Berlin Wall. Impact of this speech. The speech put an emphasis on U.S. intolerance to communism in Germany while Reagan delivered his speech. Reagan and Gorbachev, former General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, and East and West Germany began to sympathize as both the wall and communism itself fell. In other words, the speech was really impactful because, as you can see from the video, a lot of people were cheering on because they encouraged the tearing down of the wall because they felt like it was a restriction, because depending on either side you were on was the way you lived your life. It controlled your life and you couldn't do anything about that. As mentioned before, the speech itself really challenged Gorbachev because it was pushing to tear down the wall because nobody wanted it, nobody liked it, because of how it really separated the two and how different the two were, and how one side was, I'd say, better than the other because of the conditions. After the speech, it was decided that the Berlin Wall would be torn down. In November 1989, East Germany issued a decree for the wall to be open. Families reunited, people were able to travel freely, communism in Eastern Europe ended in 1990, and the collapse of the Berlin Wall marked the end of the Cold War. Ultimately, the impact of the speech was very powerful because afterwards it was decided that the Berlin Wall would be torn down, which was a really big win for the people because they did not want the wall to stay. They wanted to be able to move freely, be with their families freely, and now they were able to. Collapse of the Berlin Wall marked the end of the Cold War, and as mentioned before, the building and construction of the Berlin Wall symbolized how the Cold War was still standing, how it was still there, how there were still issues that needed to be solved, and with it taken down, you could physically see that it was over and how the problem was solved. Okay, so during this time period, a lot of artists emerged with music to express their opinions and thoughts towards the wall. Specifically speaking, Break Down the Walls by Shy, and you can see the lyrics right here. I will now play a portion of the song.
Unsung heroes, still going through in the shadow of the wall. Another one dares, 25 years of nightmares. It's gotta stop. Stop. Take it or leave it. It's a simple law. Freedom party. Break it up now. Can't they see? There's no life behind closed doors.
Now, what does this mean? A lot of artists, including Shy, wrote songs about the Berlin Wall, specifically their hopes for tearing it down. This song is an example of many who believe that there should be no wall separating East and West Berlin. The line, "It's a symbol of war, we don't want it," refers how this wall was a symbol of the Cold War, and how everyone wanted it to come to an end. The Berlin Wall was a physical symbol that you could see and know that the Cold War was going on, and how the Cold War was standing, as you could say, and how people didn't want that. People wanted to tear it down. People didn't want the Cold War to continue. They wanted it to come to an end, like the wall. The line, "When somebody dies, it adds a brick in the wall. The bigger they are, the harder they fall," is trying to say how the longer the wall is untouched rather than taken down, the worse the problem will get. They're saying how as long as the wall stays standing, there is an issue that needs to be taken care of, that needs to be solved. In conclusion, Ronald Reagan gave the Tear Down This Wall speech that was ultimately successful thanks to his confidence and ability to attract the audience. It represented America's point of view of the issue of the separation between East and West Germany. Techniques were used to strengthen his speech, such as his persuasiveness, use of German phrases, personal pronouns, etc. Thanks to the push his speech provided, the Berlin Wall was taken down.